Okay. Well, good evening and welcome everyone to the main event. In spite of COVID-19, guess what? We are here, which means we are very, very blessed and fortunate. I hope this Zoom video greets you all in excellent health in body, mind, and spirit. My name is Patrick Walker, and I am the Ruth Jones Lewis Faculty Scholar in Entrepreneurship and Free Enterprise with the Lewis Honors College here at the University of Kentucky. I'm also a faculty affiliate for the Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise in the Gatton College of Business and Economics. Tonight's event is significant for many reasons and connected to several initiatives hosted by the Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise. First, our conversation with Clifton, whom I refer to as the godfather of Black Wall Street, will highlight the origin and significance of a story that many people surprisingly have never heard of. That includes students, staff, and faculty, and friends. And so he's gonna kick this off with the conversation that I consider to be a masterclass. Second, Clifton's visit also coincides with the new course that I would teach for the Lewis Honors College in the spring, entitled Black Wall Street, The Color and Culture of Capitalism. I also may teach that course university-wide next summer. Third, the Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise and I have partnered together to conduct a socioeconomic impact case study that will examine the effect of COVID-19 on African-American and underrepresented minority-owned and managed firms here in the Lexington, Kentucky region. The case study will demonstrate the socioeconomic impact made by, it will demonstrate the socioeconomic impact made and provide recommendations in support of African-American and underrepresented communities. Fourth and finally, and most important, you see before us tonight a few students. And these students are leading the way by creating a podcast and several different events with the intention of cultivating courageous conversations that bring people together in the spirit of an entrepreneurial mindset. They're also developing a reality TV themed pilot show that will feature student teams who compete for challenges across campus and compete for prizes. And most importantly, bring people together so we can build a more stronger, inclusive, and vibrant community. Individuals win games, but teams win championships. So before I turn the program over to our student co-host, I want to introduce you to a few colleagues who helped make this all possible. And they will go in this order. First, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Charles Cordemanchi. He's the director of the Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise in the Gatton College of Business. Chuck?
Thank you, Patrick. And Mr. Taulbert, welcome to UK's virtual campus. While we wish you could have, we could have had the opportunity to meet you in person, but we're delighted that you could join us one way or another. And as Patrick mentioned, the topic you're going to be telling us about is something that I think most people don't get taught in school, and I think Patrick was talking about me when he made that, because I had myself, despite being in school despite managing to stay in school till age 27, I had never even heard of Black Wall Street until Patrick casually mentioned it in conversation earlier this year. And there's some pretty jaw-dropping stuff that's going to be new to a lot of you, and really excited that Clifton is able to be here to share it with you guys. And I want to thank, on behalf of the Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise, I want to thank the Lewis Honors College and the Martin Luther King Center for partnering with us on this event. And special thanks go to Patrick, his team of students, referred to as No Limits Productions, as well as Lewis College's Communications Director, Megan Orell, and ISFE's own administrative assistant, Kelsey Drury. They're really the ones who put in the hard work to bring this event to life. Finally, I'd like to also acknowledge ISFE's major donors, the Joseph W. Kraft III and Charles Koch Foundations. And for those of you here, especially from outside of Gatton, who may not be familiar with the Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise, our mission is to generate intellectually rigorous research and an open dialogue to discover and understand how free enterprise affects people's lives and the well-being of society. And one of the major ways we aim to fulfill that mission is with public events such as these. And the fit will be obvious as Clifton begins to talk. Now I'd like to turn it over to Kelsey, who's going to make a couple of announcements about upcoming events.
Yeah, so I just wanted to let everyone know of 2 more related upcoming virtual events that will also be jointly sponsored by ISFE, the Lewis Honors College, and the MLK Center. The first one will feature Alea Bundles, an author and journalist who will be speaking about her great-great-grandmother, Madam C.J. Walker, whose entrepreneurship made her the wealthiest African-American businesswoman and wealthiest self-made Black woman in America. That event will be on September 29th at 6 p.m., and that's also via Zoom. And then later on in the fall, we will also host Gary Hoover. He's the President's Associate's Presidential Professor and the Chair of the Economics Department at the University of Oklahoma. He'll be speaking on his research exploring how economic freedom influences the distribution of wealth and racial inequality. The date and time have not yet been finalized, but once they are, we'll make an announcement on our website, Twitter, and Facebook, which you can follow by just searching UK ISFE, and that's UKISFE. And now we'll turn it over.
And so next up will be our acting dean. She's not really an actor, but that's her official title, acting dean of the Lewis Honors College, while Dean Christian Brady, who's currently serving as the interim dean for our College of Arts and Sciences. And so I'd like to welcome Dr. Laura Bryan.
Thank you, Patrick, and welcome everyone. On behalf of the University of Kentucky Lewis Honors College, it's an honor to be part of this event, and we welcome you. If you're not familiar with the Lewis Honors College, you might want to know that our mission is really to better the Commonwealth of Kentucky and to help our students achieve many things, including developing their purpose, developing intellectually, and leading with integrity. And these kind of events certainly help us fulfill that mission. I'm especially proud to be a colleague of Dr. Patrick Walker. It's been just such a delight to work with him over the past year, and I look forward to all the great things he's doing for the college, especially now and in the upcoming year. So thank you, Patrick, for all that you do for the college. And it is a real privilege for me, and I'm sorry to admit that I don't have as much history in the topic that we're going to be talking about, but it's a real privilege to have Mr. Clifton Taulbert tell us about this part of American history that we all need to know. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
And thank you, and you can check your Cash App for those kind words you just said about me. All right. And last but certainly not least, our Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Lewis Honors College, Dr. Tara Tuttle.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker, for that kind introduction and for bringing our distinguished guest, Mr. Taulbert, to us tonight. Lewis Honors College continues to benefit from your indefatigable efforts to serve our students and to establish inclusive campus and community partnerships. Our diversity and inclusion initiatives, including our honors curriculum, are so much stronger since you've assumed your role here as the Ruth Jones Lewis Faculty Scholar in Entrepreneurship and Free Enterprise. Your labor embodies our mission. The events we choose to co-sponsor align with the core values of Lewis Honors College, which emphasize social responsibility, diversity and inclusion, community, mutual respect, and human dignity. We acknowledge that diversity is not enough, that equity and inclusion are crucial for a just community. Inclusion refers to an environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully. have equal access to opportunities and resources, can contribute to and benefit from a place they feel welcome and they feel like they belong. This requires a willingness to listen to and enter into frank dialogues like the one we are having tonight, and a willingness to abandon old ways of doing things that perpetuate structural inequities. Lewis Honors College is committed to building a community of belonging at the University of Kentucky in which all of our students, faculty, and staff are affirmed for their identities and acknowledged for their valuable contributions. A community in which we are committed to correcting the gaps in our knowledges and affirming the contributions of Black Americans to the building of our nation and our Commonwealth. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thanks again to Dr. Patrick Walker for making this happen.
And thank you again, Tara. You can also check your Cash App a little later for those very kind remarks. Clifton will be taking questions toward the end of the program. And if you all would like to support anything we're doing at the Lewis Honors College or at the Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise, you can email me, patrick@uky.edu. Again, that's patrick@uky.edu. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, I'm going to put you in the hands of our students. We just ask that they have fun and be creative with co-hosting this event, and they call themselves No Limit Productions. Gentlemen, take it from here.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Walker. Introducing Clifton Taulbert is a task that we don't take lightly at all. Honestly, his career experiences have culminated in a resume so full and impressive that simply reading it to you is probably an effective introduction. However, I don't believe that would do him justice, because who we are goes far beyond the surface level of what we do. Instead, I believe we as humans are defined by our mission and how we work to achieve said mission. On his own accord, Mr. Taulbert's mission in life is to build a pathway to a better America, and by working hard to educate and bring people together from all backgrounds, I believe he is succeeding in doing so. In the words of Mr. Taulbert himself, the endurance of our nation is contingent on our convergence.
To elaborate on this mission, Dr. Taulbert is the founder of the Fremont Corporation, a consulting firm for human-driven entrepreneurship within Tulsa, Oklahoma, and around the world. He is the author of more than a dozen books on business, diversity, and transforming the human condition. His Pulitzer-nominated biography, Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored, was the basis for a blockbuster film documenting his life as a man of color coming of age on the Mississippi Delta. He has been appointed as a trustee of the University of Tulsa and has been recognized internationally for his work in making business and building community, not only in his city, but across the world. Tonight's discussion, God willing, will deliver the history, both past and contemporary, of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the significance it has for our generation's mission to bring the nation to a deeper experience and understanding of equality and to complete the American dream.
Now, without further ado, please give a big round of applause for our speaker, Mr. Clifton Taulbert.
I'm ready. Okay, thanks for the introductions. I'm waiting for my screen to come up so that I will be sharing. Perfect. Now I feel comfortable. First of all, there are two words I want to bring to start. It's our stories. And the word is our stories. I think that life is indeed a book, and we all have a page in it. And we don't get the full story of our shared humanity unless we understand and we are part of every page in the book. So tonight gives me an opportunity to share with you some pages that we may not have known about, overlooked, or some pages that can bring new insights to our thinking and the way we look at the world around us, our country, and what we can do about tomorrow and the years to come. Our stories are the doorways to our shared history. And it's about our humanity and the stories of truth that we can bring to the table, that we can embrace, and more importantly, pass along. So behind the doors of history, there lies much of the things that we have yet to learn, but at the same time, it encompasses the opportunity for our lives to be shared, our dreams to be known, and for us to have a clear understanding of what it means to be one of 7 billion people on an incredible planet called Earth. Well, first and foremost, being in the state of Kentucky, I'm delighted to be here. And thank you very much for the invitation. But Black Wall Street is also a Kentucky story. J.B. Stratford, an entrepreneur lawyer, was born in Passaic, Kentucky, 1861. An incredible man who built the J.B. Stratford Hotel on Black Wall Street. At the time, it was the largest and most well-known Black-owned hotel in the United States. But he was born in your state, as was his father, J.C. Stratford, Julius Caesar Stratford, born a slave in the state of Kentucky. But it was he who learned to read and to understand what life had to offer and pass that on to his children. J.B. Stratford, even though he was born here, he found himself in several places, obviously while getting his law degree from Indiana. But more importantly, he had a family, an incredible family of well-known lawyers throughout the United States of America, and a granddaughter by the name of Jewel LaFont, who was the first female Deputy Solicitor General of the United States. So all of this gives credence and credit to your state, because maybe, who knows, without J.B. Stratford Road and the building of Black Wall Street, Kentuckian, we may not have had a Black Wall Street. So it's important to understand that in most avenues of life, there are more participants than we know, more participants that we've not heard about, but it's time that we hear all the stories so that we can have a full and clear understanding of who we are as a people. I remember several years ago, I had the opportunity to speak for the United States Supreme Court. And I spoke at the Library of Congress, and I was introduced by Sandra Day O'Connor. And she said something that I will always remember in the introduction. She said, no one accomplishes anything alone. And this is true for Black Wall Street as well. It was not accomplished by one person, but many people. And I've divided my talk into 3 sections. Section 1 is settling the territory. It's important to understand the role that the territory played in Black Wall Street. Second, creating their field of dreams. Can you imagine, if you will, 5 million free enslaved people with no severance pay, no homes of their own, and no prospects for a future, but yet they built one, an incredible one. Black Wall Street would not have happened had it not been for the ingenuity that was pent up in these 5 million enslaved Americans. An incredible story of what can happen when free enterprise become available to all of us to fully explain, to fully embrace, and to fully carry out. So let's get started. On the 3rd part would be a night and day of horror remembered. Part 1. It's doing some moving by itself. Let me see if I can get back to where I am. Okay, part 1, settling the territory. Okay, now am I there now? Okay, settling the territory, a key component of the rise of Black Wall Street. It's important to understand that the territory is a result of the 1803 purchase of the Louisiana Purchase, where Oklahoma was included in that purchase. And all of that would play a role in what happened in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The territory was called by many God-forsaken. And that's amazing because at some point in time, that was totally changed when Oklahoma became our version of Saudi Arabia. For the oil that was discovered in 1905 in a place called Glenpool, Oklahoma. The oil flowed, and many of the people who were Native people, as well as African Americans, and as well as those descended from the Africans who were enslaved, became part of that as well. So all of these facets will fit into a composite story of how we ended up with this incredible place in Oklahoma called Black Wall Street. Okay, now I'm getting the feel. It moves a little and then it gets back to where it should be. This is great. I'm going to give you some dates because I think it's very important to understand the role that dates play in helping us to fully understand who we are and what's going on. How did we come to be where we are today? Significant events between 1830 and 1832. One was the historical U.S. visit of Alexis de Tocqueville and Gustave de Beaumont. These were two Frenchmen, both 26 and 25 years of age, actually millennials of their day. They had come to America, to Philadelphia in particular, to study the penal system. But while here, they took copious notes of their discovery of America. In 1832, America was only 78 years old. So you're looking at a very short time that it is becoming a world power. But there were a couple of things that Alexis de Tocqueville noted in his book, Democracy in America. And one of those would be the Indian challenge and the challenge of enslavement. How do we handle these things will speak to who America really is. 1830, 1832, we also had the famous Indian Removal Act to the territories, ordered by President Andrew Jackson. And let's look a little deeper at that because this becomes very important. Many of you have heard of the Trail of Tears. There were about 60,000 people on the Trail of Tears, and that represented, if you will, the Native Americans' 5 nations. But also in the Trail of Tears, that many people do not know, there were 5,000 enslaved Blacks. And all of this would be important because of the role that the Trail of Tears played in selling the territory and the territory role in creating Black Wall Street, excuse me, among those Blacks who were enslaved by the Native people. In 1863, 1865, imagine this, if you will. 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation. The opportunity to find many of the enslaved people set free. Millions were set free in 1863. 1865, the 13th Amendment freed the remaining enslaved people. So now you have over 5 million people, or slightly under, who are now free. But let's think for a minute, what do you do when you're free, but you don't have a severance package? But you have worked for 246 years in America. And at that time, cotton was really the greatest export that America had. And cotton was literally making this a world power, not only the United States of America, our country, but also England as well. And this great wealth that existed during that period of time, there was one element that was not considered. For all of you that are entrepreneurs and starting a business and thinking about a business, if you could have a business that ran for 246 years and you didn't have to pay a salary to any of the millions of people that work for you, then what would that do to your bottom line? Well, 1863 would come, so would 1865. Now you have these African Americans, these enslaved people, they are now free, but they are free from the perspective of they're no longer enslaved. But remember, during slavery, you don't own anything. You don't own a house, you don't own a mule, you don't own anything at all. Everything you have belongs to someone else. But now you're set out on a journey of your own. However, you may have heard a term called 40 acres and a mule. And some people say that with sort of a grimace, a laugher, like it's a joke, but it's not a joke. Because 40 acres and a mule in 1861 was tantamount to having stock in Microsoft. That was the economy of the day, an agrarian society. And had each enslaved family received 40 acres and a mule, they would have at the same time received economic independence, because then they would have been able to start their own lives, take care of their own families, build their own world. This would have been the ideal. So the 40 acres and a mule, which would have brought about economic freedom, was espoused by General Sherman, Thaddeus Stevens, and Charles Summers, two US congressmen who literally gave their lives to equity, gave their lives to inclusivity, gave their lives to a collaborative America. And very few people have heard of them, but they left a great legacy of what the possibilities could have been had those opportunities took place. 1877. If you subtract 1877 from 1865 from 1877, you have 12 years left. So I always use the example, if men and women are incarcerated for 5 years or more in our prison system today, when they get out of prison, many of them, the recidivism rate is very high in our country, unfortunately, because the inability to get a job or the mindset that is needed in order to take care of themselves may have been altered by being incarcerated. What do you think could have happened to a person who was treated as chattel property for 246 years with no rights at all? Now they are free. So what do they do? Who do they become? And this is such amazing to me that in 1877, only 12 years after being set free, they founded their first Black town, Nicodemus, Kansas, that still exists today. Wagon trains and Black pioneers. I never thought in terms of Black people being pioneers and living in wagon trains, because every movie that I saw as a kid, all of the pioneers and all the people on wagon trains were white. There were no Black people on the wagon trains. There were no Black people known as pioneers, but yes, they were. And Nicodemus, Kansas became the first town to be settled by newly freed slaves in 1877. So it is not just the settlement that excites me, but what excites me is the mindset, which is what we've been talking about all day today. How do you, in simply 12 years, have enough gumption, enough entrepreneurial nuances in your life that you can set out, not just to build a house, but to establish a town? I think there's a story behind that we're going to look at this evening as well. Did I do too many? Okay. 1887. What happened in 1887? The Native nations, Blacks included from 1832 during the Trail of Tears, were ordered to accept partial individual pieces of land or lose their citizenship. It's called the Dow's Commission. And this commission not only brought land, individual owned land, to Native people, but also to many of the Blacks who were involved with those Native people received land as well. So at some point in 1887, during that time period, Blacks now free received land probably in the range of millions of acres of land that they own in the godforsaken territory that we now call the state of Oklahoma. And this becomes very important as we look at the establishment of Black Wall Street. 1889, the famous Oklahoma land run. Blacks were included. Another impact on the rise of Black Wall Street. So Black Wall Street was not something that happened overnight. There were many paths that led to this being established, and what we celebrate and what we also have great sorrow over, the destruction of such an incredible place. Now, let's ask a question. And I'm going to ask Noah if you can help me remove this from the sides. Can we do that? And do what we did earlier so I don't have all of the words covered up? Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Now, I have no problem asking for help, even though I think technology has done a great job. And when it doesn't do exactly what I needed to do, it's always good to have a person sitting by your side. That, to me, is the plus for life. Did ancient Black stories before 1619 inform the former enslaved Africans drawing life from a distant past. I don't know that. This is a supposition on my part because I tried to understand how does one move from enslavement for 246 years to all of a sudden, 12 years after that, building a town, and by 1920, 50 identifiable all Black towns in America and 90 colleges. What happened? Who were these people to be able to accomplish this when they started out simply walking away from the world of enslavement that they had known? So let's take a look. The kingdom, the lost kingdom of Kush. These were people who conceivable, when you consider the millions of Africans who were enslaved, they would have come from many of these places throughout the continent. But the lost kingdom of Kush, which I had read about when I was a freshman in college, but it was not until September 2020, which is this month, this year, that the Smithsonian will be actually publishing what was discovered in 1916 by the Egyptologist George Reasoner. And I'm wondering in my own mind, would there have been a memory of this particular kingdom that was absolutely incredible? The thing that was of interest to me was that George Reasoner, an American Egyptologist, very well known and highly respected, what they uncovered when they uncovered the kingdom of Kush, they were so amazed that they made the statement that this could not have been done by Black people. These were things that they looted and put it in their graves from Egypt, not of their own making. However, this has been debunked, and the Smithsonian has published the publication, The Lost Kingdom of Kush, what happened, what they did, and who they were. And I was so excited about this, I wanted to call to buy a book. And before I get half of the words out of my mouth, the Smithsonian said, sold out. We don't have any more, and we won't have any more. So I had to go on eBay to buy my book. Hopefully I'll have it by Monday. I'm just wondering, was something in the cultural DNA of the enslaved people that would allow them not to let slavery so impress their minds that they were not able to do some things that seemed to be unspeakable at the time in which they were done. Africa's lost kingdom. Africa has never lacked civilization, nor has it ever been as cut off from world events as has been routinely portrayed. The 25th dynasty of Black pharaohs from 747 to 656 BC, referenced in our Bible in 2 Kings 19 and 9, Isaiah 37 and 9. I remember these stories, but this was the first time that all of the data was there. You're not talking about hearsay. You're not talking about supposition, but you're talking about real, deliberate data that bring to light these incredible people that lived at a different place and a different time in history. And I'm just simply wondering, could the enslaved people, could they have been somehow related through culture, through stories, because oral history was so incredible on the continent? Is it possible that they knew from where they had come, even though their lives had taken a stopping point at slavery? And lastly, on this particular part is a story as it moves around the Africa's lost kingdom. In the 14th century, Africa produced Emperor Mansa Musa of the Malian Empire, the wealthiest historical figure that has ever lived. Today, his wealth would be somehow surmised to be around $416 billion. I never knew such a person existed. I never knew that he made a pilgrimage from Timbuktu to the Middle East, and he carried so much gold with him because he was in control of the gold routes and the salt routes from that part of Africa to the rest of the known world. These are stories that are just as important to the rise of Black Wall Street because they speak to a place in time that was, but they also speak to a place and time that could be as well. Now, the American saga, the rise of Black Wall Street. I want to see if I can move that over a little. No, I'm supposed to be on the first one, part 2. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yours is there, but mine's is not. Okay, maybe it won't work. Okay, I'll read from yours. An American saga, the rise of Black Wall Street. So part 2 is about creating their field of dreams. 50 identifiable all-Black towns by 1920. Absolutely amazing. Thanks, Javed. Okay. Now, okay. The territory is not God-forsaken anymore. Oil was discovered in 1905, and this changes everything. And as I said earlier, Glenpool, Oklahoma was where oil was discovered, and it became America's version of Saudi Arabia today. Oklahoma Territory, 1906, Greenwood was established. Deep Greenwood was born, massive Black land ownership, Black newspapers telling the story. The future home of Black Wall Street, from the north, south, east, they came. 1906, all of a sudden, it's still a territory, but Greenwood is being established, and it would later be known as Black Wall Street. But the people coming into the territory, as you will notice as we move through this, came from different parts of the United States, bringing with them their own sense of entrepreneurship, their own understanding of gumption, their own tenacity, their own persistence, all of the elements that are essential to be successful. It seemed to have come and collided in a wonderful way in this stretch of land north of the downtown of Tulsa, Oklahoma. However, let me backtrack for a minute here. There were people who came into the territory, and Oklahoma was being considered by many as a Black and Indian state. But that changed when Oklahoma became a state in 1907. And in 1907, when Oklahoma became a state, segregation became legal, Jim Crow was installed, and Deep Greenwood was strategically placed as the Black folks' town. And so there weren't that much competition. Therefore, Black Wall Street, or Greenwood as it was known, began to grow and grow and grow because of legal segregation that had become part of the territories. It's important to understand that prior to statehood, the territories were not managed as the segregated states in the South were. And that's one of the reasons why it was attracting so many people of color from around the United States to resettle and make their homes in the territory. The visitor to Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1913 was Booker T. Washington. And most of us have heard of Booker T. Washington. I know for me, growing up in the Mississippi Delta, as I did as a young man in school, there were about 5 Black people that I studied. I knew nothing about Black history, had never heard of Oklahoma Black Wall Street. It happened to me in 1974 or 73 is when I first heard of Black Wall Street. But Booker T. Washington, I had studied and understood who he was and was proud of what he had accomplished in his life. But he came to visit Tulsa in 1913, and the Negro Black, it was not called Black Wall Street at the time, it was called the Negro Wall Street of America, was taking shape just 48 years later. And there was a building built there that was built by the Williams. It was called the Dreamland Theater. And this was a building that Booker T. Washington would have an opportunity to have seen because of the time in which the building was established and the year in which it was built. And he could very easily witness, could have easily witnessed the building of this theater. Black-owned theater, Williams Dreamland Theater, office buildings at the top. All of these things were going on, being built on Greenwood, which we now know as Black Wall Street. Living beyond slavery. These are the pictures. These are the pictures of how slavery looked and what it produced in our country. But behind this picture, were there other pictures of nations rising? Who were these people in the land before they came to America? What did they do? Who were they? How do you live beyond slavery? How do you imagine a nation rising? How do you imagine the dreaming and the building that could take place? I would say there was an abundance of will that had not been lost in the cotton fields of the South or the rice fields of the Upper South as they would have been in the Carolinas. But who were these people? And the reason I'm hesitating is so that I can get caught up with this. In search of place, Black Americans on the move, former enslaved becoming emboldened pioneers. Cheyney University, the first Black university, was established in the Philadelphia, but in the Pennsylvania area in 1837. And it was served as a guide for Black colleges going forward in the South. By 1900, 90 Black institutions of higher learning were established. A combination of people worked with in both white and Black in the establishment of these colleges. But one of the things that always amazed me, it was illegal for the Africans to learn to read English and to learn to write English. They could either be hung for having done so, and if white people would have agreed to teach them, they could have easily lost their lives as well. So how do you have this pent-up ability to become? But yet, and when that time does arrive, you find yourself first and foremost looking for your families, and then secondly, creating institutions of higher education. Black Wall Street, the call of the territory, an amalgamation of Black dreams and partnerships. Mr. O.W. Gorley, he was from Arkansas, educator, investor, land developer, and he's credited with the purchase of the original 40 acres north of downtown Tulsa, which eventually became Black Wall Street. And it's amazing to me that after oil was discovered, it seems as if visionaries existed, and these visionaries began to think in terms of how do we become part of what is happening in the territories. And O.W. Gorley was one of those people. He built magnificent churches in Black Wall Street, had clubs, small hotels, not like the hotel that J.B. Stratford built, but smaller hotels. But he was, by all definition, an entrepreneur who had done quite well. Edwin P. McCabe was a futurist, a Black attorney. He was never a slave, born free in Yonkers, New York. He had big ideas. He came to the territory, and one of the things that he was leading and trying to do was to have the President of the United States recognize Oklahoma Territory as a Black and Indian state. He died before that happened because the territory became a state. They combined Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory into the state of Oklahoma that we currently have today. But it's interesting, if you have been watching the news lately, the Supreme Court ruled that Indian Territory, there was a little snafu. Something didn't happen in the 1800s that they thought had happened, which meant that the sovereignty of the Native people as it relates to legal action is still in place as it was then. So it's amazing what existed prior to statehood and what has now come back around again. And this is J.B. Stafford, the entrepreneur on Greenwood who fostered many partnerships. And it was this man who was born in your state of Kentucky that built the Stratford Hotel, the largest Black-owned hotel in the United States at the time, and had an incredible family that has made tremendous contributions to the United States of America. Now, this was another family who were investors on Black Wall Street, a Black family, the James Henry Goodwin family from the state of Mississippi. They owned businesses in a place called Water Valley, Mississippi. But guess what? They had heard of a place called Black Wall Street. They picked up and just loaded their stuff up in whatever one would do at that time period and headed west to the territory, then the state of Oklahoma, and became prominent members of Oklahoma's community and Tulsa's community and the Black community of Tulsa, Oklahoma. The grandson still exists today as a lawyer in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But this was one of the families that invested in the rise of Black Wall Street. And they were from the state of Mississippi, my home state. On Greenwood, some were thriving while others were finding their way. A lady of means in Deep Greenwood. It amazes me the wealth that was there, but understanding that the land that was there had oil under it. And many of the land parcels that were owned by the people of color, that land also made them all men and women as well. At one time, one of the wealthiest females in the world was a young Black girl whose family had all of these land rights in Oklahoma. It's an amazing story unto itself. And you probably read about August, I think it's called August Moon, I believe, a recent movie that had to do with the Osage natives and the land that they had and the wealth that they had. So there was wealth coming from oil, wealth coming from land ownership in and around the whole state of Oklahoma. And this was brought into this one place. And it all began to happen collectively. And you ended up with women of means living in Deep Greenwood. A mogul family on Greenwood, Tulsa's Black Wall Street, John and Luella Williams and their son. Of all the photographs that we have located about Black Wall Street, this is the one that I like best. And the reason I like this one best is because it's the mom, the dad, and the son. It's the present and the future. Their future was secure by virtue of what they were doing. Their son is sitting there realizing, maybe too young to know what his family did or the wealth that his parents had, but he would have been the next generation to take his parents' dream and take it to the next level, because this is what we do. We pass things on to our children and hope that they will take it to the next level. Unfortunately, this young Black kid never had the opportunity to fully take his dad and mom's dream to the next level, because Black Wall Street would not last forever. But I love this picture because it shows me the possibilities of what could be. Not only did he own the Williams, the Dreamland Theater, but he owned office complexes as well. And he had a major garage that worked on all the high-dollar cars. And because oil was so bountiful and plentiful in the territory and in the state of Oklahoma, you had most of the people there had smack brand new cars. And he had learned how to work on them and had a team of people who did likewise. Again, a mogul family on Greenwood, Tulsa's Black Wall Street. That's his building there, the Dreamland Theater. Faith was very important in the territories for African Americans. It has been a something that's very important in their lives and remains so today as well. But it's amazing to me that this church, Mount Zion Baptist Church, which was totally destroyed, it had only been open less than 3 months before the riot came that destroyed the church and killed people that they're still trying to determine the number of people who were killed. But this is the Mount Zion Baptist Church. Prior to this, they worshiped in a cow shed, but they saved their money and built this magnificent structure that was not the envy of, but people would drive up into the Black community to see this church that Black people had built prior to 1921. Merchants on Greenwood. I only just took one picture. There were anywhere from 100 to 300 different merchants on Greenwood. And the reason I like this picture because it's a very inclusive picture of both men and women together. Because in those days, there was still the challenge that women had to face to be equally represented, be you Black or white. But I love this picture because the women are there with their place as well as the men. This is the Greenwood Booster Club, Black partnerships, Black visionaries. These are the men who were setting the standards for what they wanted this community to be, how it was to look, what they would build, where they would build it, and what the next plans were for the future. Again, keep in mind, slavery only ended in 1865. To get into the 1900s, you only got one generation. But yet with this just one generation between them, they were on their way to accomplish something that would be absolutely wonderful, not just for them, but for our country as well. A.C. Jackson, a very incredible story of one of the top surgeons in America, and he was esteemed by the Mayo brothers who built the Mayo Clinic, nationally recognized for all that he had done. But the reason it's a sad picture because in addition to being a surgeon and entrepreneur on Greenwood, on the night of the massacre, with his hands raised, having been promised, all he had to do was go to the fairgrounds and just stay there until everything was over, with hundreds of Black people marching to the fairgrounds. He was shot face to face, died in the streets of Greenwood. B.C. Franklin, the Dream Keeper. This is a very important story because noted Oklahoma lawyer was descendant of slaves who had been on the Trail of Tears. Buck Colbert Franklin was the father of John Hope Franklin, the noted Black historian who died just a few years ago, who was an emeritus dean educator at Duke University, who wrote the book Up From Slavery, which has become an incredible book to read about slavery, the movement up from slavery, and the movement to become from enslaved to citizens. This is the father of John Hope Franklin, the noted American historian. Buck Colbert Franklin had a statement. He said, "Good people ought not be strangers." I've always enjoyed that statement. Good people ought not be strangers. The newspaper in Tulsa at the time, the Oklahoma Sun, the term Negro Wall Street, Greenwood District prospers. Thriving on Deep Greenwood. Now it's time to talk about the horror in part 3, an American saga, the rise of Black Wall Street the fall of Black Wall Street, a night and day of horror remembered. 1973 would be the year that I first heard the story. I had come to Oklahoma to college out of the military, and I had become involved in the city of Tulsa, served on the advisory board of the Gilcrease Museum. And there was a Black lady who also served on the board as well, Opal Dargan. She was I think around 7 years old, if I'm not mistaken, when the riot took place. And one day I had gone to a meeting there, and we were sitting in the Gilcrease Museum waiting, maybe 30 or 40 minutes. And she asked me if I knew about Black Wall Street. I had never heard about it before. Even in Tulsa where it happened, there are people who were born in Tulsa, lived there all their lives, and had never heard of the tragedy of 1921, nor had they heard of the incredible economic phenomenon of 1921. And I certainly had heard nothing about it. But I remember sitting with her and her telling me the night of the fire, how her family maybe thought that the newspaper, which was down from them, was burning old newspapers. That was the smoke, that was the fire. But they later learned that their whole community was on fire. And I remembered as she told me, it was as if it was all happening again. She could see the horror. She remembered the flames, but I could feel the heat. It was such an intense conversation from this lady who remembered from being 5 years old what had happened to their home, the world that they lived in, the place that she had been born in, the place that she had grown up. All of a sudden, it was gone. It wasn't there anymore. Totally and completely gone. But May 31st was Memorial Day in America, and it was also Memorial Day in Tulsa as well. People were celebrating the work that our soldiers had done, and the war was over. World War I was over now. And the Black people celebrated at their cemeteries where they had services and at their churches, and the white citizens did likewise. People were planning on waking up with everything being well. But on this particular day, this particular night, May 31st, the story unfolded that a young Black man had somehow accosted a young white girl in the elevator of the Drexel building in downtown Tulsa. None of this was true, but it became the truth to many. And it was the start of the riot. The young man was imprisoned, was jailed, not in prison, but was jailed. And just maybe months before, for a similar accident, it was a young white man who had been hung. And so hanging was still part of what happened in those days. So the Black soldiers who had fought in World War I in France, they had all come home. But they had come home with a different idea of who they were and who they had become. Because being in France was one of the first times that their humanity was fully recognized, and they were treated without any doubt as first-class citizens. But they also did not bring back from the war the fear that they had before they left. So all of these things was a culmination of things that happened that night on May 31st, 1921, in order for the jailers to get this young man out of the jail, because many of the citizens wanted to hang him and take him and kill him without any type of court to determine what had really happened. So while all of this was going on, shots were fired, and once the shots were fired, life changed forever. June 1st, things are beginning to burn now. And what was once an incredible place that people around the country had heard about, especially those of African descent, This is Mount Zion, the church that they had built from the cowshed, now being totally destroyed on June 1st. These are the Black citizens. They are being marched to sit, not to the fairgrounds, where they are being given green cards to let you know if you can work or you can't work or you can't go back or you have to stay there. They have basically become prisoners in their own town. This is the hardest picture for me of a young boy holding his brother or his sister who apparently has died. 24 hours later, Black Wall Street totally destroyed. Destroyed as if it never existed. And that's the theater, one of the pride buildings of Black Wall Street. That's how it was left on June 1st. But they would rebuild, and by 1937, Black Wall Street had returned. But from my perspective, never with the mindset that had built it. The Salvation Army, the YMCA, and countless Black professional volunteers from across the country made their way to Deep Greenwood to lend their hands and heart during those early months of the 1921 restoration. Remember B.C. Franklin? Mr. Buck Colbert Franklin, the Dream Keeper, noted Oklahoma lawyer. This is B.C. Franklin practicing law after the riot. Because you see, the trains were coming into Oklahoma. So much was happening there with the oil and everything and cattle, and they wanted land. And the land that they wanted was the land that was owned by the African Americans, Black Wall Street. And for the many years they had been asked, they would refuse to sell their land. But now that there's nothing on their land, the major businesses were trying to buy it for pennies on the dollar. But B.C. Franklin, this incredible Black lawyer, took their court to the Oklahoma Supreme Court and won, and saved all of their land. Black Wall Street, Black capitalism, and economic phenomenon, tenacity, tragedy, and triumph. The Negro Wall Street, Black capitalism, remembered. By 1926, Black Wall Street was up and running again, hosting notable Black visitors, which included George Washington Carver and W.E.B. Du Bois, who was the founder of the NAACP and one of the first African Americans to graduate from Harvard University. Our stories is the doorway to our shared history. But behind the doors of history, the human journey awaits us. It has really been my honor and my pleasure to talk to you about something that I'm still learning about. But I've also come to the conclusion that every American story is all of our stories. Every page is our page. And the doorways that the story opens, behind those doors, that's our shared history. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. Thank you so much.
Let's give Clifton a round of applause. Wow. You can go ahead and start. Wow. You can go ahead and start giving, submitting questions through the Q&A, not the chat function. And speaking of Q&A, I want to acknowledge someone who I've gotten on her last nerve for the past 2 weeks. Megan, are you able to show your face? Because she gets all the credit. Everything technical to bring this to fruition. She has done, and let's applaud Megan too. She's the woman behind the curtain today, and I guess she's not going to let us see us, and she's going to be mad at me for doing this. And so,
yeah, but that's enough. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Let's get to the questions.
So again, before we get to the questions, I'm going to go back to my student co-host, putting it back in your hands. But I just wanted to acknowledge Clifton. And Clifton, before I turn it back to them, you plan on spending a lot of February with me. I know you're going to be booked, but there's no way I cannot not have you give this presentation in my class next semester. So February, if you just save me one Tuesday or Thursday, I would appreciate it. Will you commit to that now? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, students, it's back in your hands. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, looking at this Q&A, the first question we have is from Jake, and he's wondering about your views on capitalism.
My views on capitalism. You know, I like the system, but every system has an opportunity to be better and to provide avenues that may not have been included historically. I like the idea of a person being able to maximize his or her potential and be given the opportunity to do that and to reap the benefits of having done so. But at the same time, I think it is equally as important to realize I don't want to be the only happy person on the planet. I want other people happy as well. So as I make my journey work for me, then I have to ask another question: what can I do to make the journey of others work equally as well?
That is phenomenal. To follow, oh, Bryce, did you want to go?
Yeah, give me 1 second. So,
My bad. Keep going.
all right. Somebody asked that they, I'm going to skip to the most recent question asked, that do we think that the establishments in Oklahoma and the territory is a product of Black people being run off from their own territories in the communities and from the South and being moved up north? And then also to follow up with that, what roles should HBCUs play in restoring Black Wall Street in America?
Okay, I heard the question, but it was a little convoluted.
Yeah,
there were like about 3 different things in that strand.
I'll reword that.
And I'm trying to figure out how to tackle that.
All right, let me reword it.
See if you could reword it for me.
Actually, no, I'm going to scratch that first question because the one that I was searching for was this one. In Mr. Taulbert's opinion, in today's climate, do you think that Black people could ever rebuild or build another Wall Street? And then to follow up with that, what role should HBCUs play in making this happen?
Black Wall Street, first of all, is not a place. It's a mindset. And the mindset is what we bring to the table to accomplish those empirical evidence of the mindset at work. And the question probably is, can we create or develop the mindset that was very prominent? Because from my perspective, the worst thing that happened in the destruction on Black Wall Street was not necessarily the burning of the buildings. It was the loss of the mindset that caused those buildings to be there in the first place. And from my perspective, that to me is what has to happen. The collectivism around the mindset of I can do this. Because I have to keep in mind that we can do things should we choose to do it. Now, there will always be barriers, no matter who you are. But the barriers can't be any bigger than they were then and having done what they accomplished. So I would say that HBCUs would have an incredible opportunity if looking at a comprehensive economic platform to make some things happen. but that would require a collaborative work between HBCUs, not as individual units, but as a collective working together to achieve a greater good.
Well, maybe to follow up on that, then, does anything like that exist? Does any organization or collaborative force exist between HBCUs that you're aware of?
I know that there are organizations where HBCUs are members of that handle certain aspects of what their challenges and what their opportunities are. But whether or not there's a collective that have a collective focus on economic empowerment, that I'm not sure of.
Okay, awesome. I know that Dr. Carl Reed of the National Society of Black Engineers, he's developing certain programs, but it's specific to the engineering community. So, but in regards to it as a whole, I'm not entirely certain. So, to continue our line of questions, this one is a different shift. How can, oh, by the way, as a note, we will not be able to get to everyone's questions. We are going to try and pick the ones that we think will bring the best discussion. How can white people be better accomplices to people of color in developing and encouraging systems which lift minorities out of unequal circumstances?
I call it the opportunity to recognize our sisterhood and brotherhood. That seems rather simplistic, but we have based everything for so long on color. And we haven't quite figured out how to walk around that. We haven't quite figured out how to embrace that. But you remember the name Charles Summers and Thaddeus Stevens that I mentioned earlier in my talk, who were two white congressmen in the 1860s? Both of these men fought tooth and nail for the African American or the enslaved people to be absolutely treated properly. Did everything they possibly could, but everything was against them. The bills didn't pass, etc. But I would say, from my own perspective, that I have to make a decision and live with it. And that decision is, you are my brother, period. Now, you may not feel the same way about me. Trevor may not feel the same way, but I have to make my decision. And I have lived long enough to know that the world is better served when we embrace our total humanity, not just a faction of our humanity.
So thank you, Mr. Taulbert. We have another question coming in from the chat, and it's from Monica. And Monica wanted to thank you first for the inspirational talk. And she asked, do you see any parallels between the tensions that led up to Black Wall Street and the current racial relations that we have occurring today?
Envy, jealousy, because you have to understand the economic climate during this time. The war was over. Oil was not as highly prized at the end of the war as it was during the war. You had a lot of white workers out of work. Black Wall Street was doing well. So you had envy. So there was a lot of things going, not just one thing, but multiple things. But when we use the term us and them, they and us, it creates an emotional division that is somehow substantiated by the fact that we live on different streets, different parts of the town. And I'll give you an example. I did work in one of the southern states, and these are teachers that have been working together for 25 and 30 years, both Black and white teachers. They had no idea where each other lived because they had never visited. from 8 to 3, they had a professional relationship. But at 3:30, that relationship closed down and picked up again at 8 in the morning. Good community is a 24-hour process that never ends. It's not a few hours of the day. It's our life. And that is what I believe to be the important thing, is to not define things by color. And that's what we've done. And that's why, remember me telling the story of the Kingdom of Kush? George Reasoner could not believe that people of my color and darker had built this kingdom. And all the artifacts that were stored and found, he credited those to Egyptians as opposed to the people who actually did it. Now that is being uncovered, and the 2020 September issue of the Smithsonian will tell the true story of what was uncovered in 1916. Again, many people have such small thoughts about people of color, and it's very difficult to move them to the other part of an equity mindset. But that's the journey we have to take if we are to fully recognize and benefit from this human journey. That the goods of intelligence have not just been labeled in one place.
So in that case, do you think it's possible, at least from what you've shared, do you think it's possible that Black Wall Street could succeed if there is no allyship?
If there's no what now?
If there is no allyship, do you think Black Wall Street can succeed in the 21st century?
I don't know if it's possible to go back and recreate what was. I think it's possible to go forward and create what should have been or what could be.
Quick question. What do you think is the key missing factor in our communities around the nation based on current events?
Well, obviously, Mr. Deron, there are so many current events today. Do you have any particular event you would like to lay on me for discussing?
We can start with the events of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Okay, let's start with that one, and that's a good one, because I love this. I love the term, because I'm old enough to remember Emmett Till. I knew exactly where I was when he was murdered. I knew exactly where I was on the day and time that he was murdered, and that information came to our community. I remember the fear that people had. And I remember in my small community, the sheriff would ride around on a horse, like a cowboy. And it was not just to say hi to the citizens, but to remind us of who he was, and we should fear him. Also, in the period of time of hanging, thousands of Black people were hung. Many of them were hung on Sunday afternoons after church, so that the families could have a picnic around the hanging. We weren't considered important at all. Very, very disposable. So yes, Black Lives Matter.
We'll take 2 more questions. Again, this is Clifton's 4th presentation for us, so we'll take 2 more questions, and we will try to get him to answer them in between now and our next presentation on the 29th, featuring Miss Alelia Bundles. The 2 of them actually met virtually this past week. So we'll take 2 more questions, please.
Mr. Taulbert?
Yes, Trevor.
Do you think if more complete history was incorporated into our education system, that it would help the young people of America?
Trevor, you are so incredibly right. Black history was purposely left on the floor. It's almost like a movie. And you go through and you cut. All the Black history was cut out, left on the floor. I mean, there's so much that people just don't know because no one tells you. You know, for me growing up, my only picture of Africa was the movies Tarzan. Tarzan, Jane, and Boy, and a few Black people who pretended to be Africans. No one talked about the Kingdom of Kush. No one talked about the Black Pharaohs, the 25th dynasty. No one mentioned anything like that. It was in no history books. No one mentioned Black Wall Street. I never heard about it. I guess if I hadn't gone to Oklahoma, I would have never heard about it. So there is so much that builds all of us up. You know, I know European history backwards and forward. Hit me on the head and I can discuss Queen Anne with you. Hit me on the head, I can discuss Sir Walter Raleigh taking off his cape so that the Queen would not get her shoes dirty walking in the mud. I know European history because that's what I was taught. I don't know my own history because I wasn't taught my history, and that would leave you with the idea if you weren't taught it, that meant you didn't have a history. Well, we know better now.
Okay, I can grab one last one out of the Q&A. Someone asked, what funding did the pioneers use to establish Black Wall Street?
What funding? Interesting, they had their own money and they were in the process of building banks on Black Wall Street, but they couldn't borrow money from the existing white banks that existed at the time. And there were no federal programs to help them or anything like that. So they scraped and saved. They worship in the cowshed for church until they raised enough money to actually build their edifices themselves. And time was different. It may have taken a year or two to build it, but that's okay. It's going to be ours when it's done. And I think that was a different mindset on the expectations of start and finish and what you were actually building. But also there was another thing too going on, the turnaround of the dollar within the community. The dollar stayed in the Black community on Wall Street much longer than it stays in a Black community today. The dollar probably stays hours in the Black community today or less. Whereas in those days, a dollar could stay for months because everybody was buying from the people who were in that community. So that $1 just kept moving around and everybody was getting their piece of that dollar. That's the economic factor of how things grow, work, and become, is the economic movement of the dollars through the system. I don't know. My background academically is in banking and finance. And I serve as a director of Central Bank of Oklahoma, serve on the Asset and Liability Committee. I'm chair of that committee. And I understand clearly what it takes to make a community thrive, what happens to the dollars. But when dollars leave quicker than they get there, that's a problem.
Awesome, thank you. Well, sir, on behalf of the University of Kentucky, the event sponsors, which again are the Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise and the Gatton College of Business and Economics, the co-sponsors, which are the Lewis Honors College, MLK Center, and No Limits Productions, and all of the panelists. We would just like to say thank you for your time and your wisdom. And you told us you were a fan of Motown music, so I'll play that while everybody else just, says their closing.
Thank you.
So again, I just put the link to our Clifton, thank you again. This conversation, as the music plays, I don't hear music in the background. we're going to continue this conversation. Obviously, we can't, this was a lot to unpack in one night. So the conversation continues with Miss Alelia Bundles on September 29th on a Tuesday, the same theme. Let me just say for our students, I am so proud of you all again. More to come, but thank you for embracing this and running with it. To our partners through Gatton College of Business Institute for the Study of Free Enterprise, thank you. You know, this is going to be research, this is going to be events and more presentations. Tara and Laura, you both are a blessing to work with. Megan, thank you too. And Clifton, tell Noah we said thank you for showing up to help you. Hey, thanks, Noah. Clifton, I tell you, man, again, you're stuck with us, and I'm really serious. You're really stuck with us. I know you went to University of Louisville before you came here, but I promise you we will engage you and treat you much better, okay?
You have to really work hard at that.
Okay, well, hey, game on. All right, thank you to everyone. We're going to sign off now. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe. Blessings to you all. Thank you. Thank you
all of you very much. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Taulbert.
Thank you, Mr. Taulbert. Thank you, everyone.
Let me get a picture for y'all sign off. Let me get a picture of everybody on this on 3. Smile. Chuck, can you show your face? Can you show your beautiful face, Chuck? Chuck? Oh, I'm gonna get on his case. All right. Okay, there he is. On 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, we got it. I'm gonna put this on linked. Hold on. Yeah, it's a good one.
Patrick, can we, is there a chance for someone to ask questions after the fact? We have a comment.
That's up to Mr. Taulbert. He's been here since 9:30, but that's up to him.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, he wanted to, I think he just wants to connect with you maybe later. This is from Steven Stockton. He said he's sorry he missed the vast majority of this. He had to put his son to bed. He's hoping for a recording. I told him I'd send him one. He grew up in Oklahoma City in the 90s, graduating Del City High School in 2003. And he came in, as you were mentioning, all the European history, but nothing of your own. He learned about the Greenwood Massacre. He goes on a little bit, but he was asking, is there a way I can ask questions after this, perhaps tomorrow or this weekend? Would he be able to ask questions after the fact, or?
You know, I would say if he would get a question over to Dr. Walker,
okay,
then I will answer it through Dr. Walker.
Okay, actually,
Patrick at uky.edu.
Stephen, I'll send you that one as well. And if for some reason you don't get this one, you can send it to me as well. You have my email for the recording. I'll send it to you as soon as we get off of here. Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
Hey, Acting Dean, you want to take us all out for drinks?
Yeah, but that's right.
Yeah, wait a minute, except Bryce can't go.
Well, those of us that
And
can't
Javid, neither Trevor nor Bryce nor Javid. Just can go.
This was awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Taulbert. Oh my gosh, I learned so much from you. I really appreciate it.
Well, it was really a pleasure. And hopefully the next time I come to the University of Kentucky, I won't be tired, my throat will be better, and I won't be coughing and drinking water every 5 seconds.
It'll be in person. I'm hoping and praying for in person.
Yeah.
And look, do we need to send you some Kentucky bourbon? Because that helps my throat. It does. But really, I have allergies, and so Kentucky bourbon is my medicine.
Noah says he'll take it if I can.
All right.
Gear too, Patrick. Let me know. We can send you a hat or a shirt. You let Patrick know your sizes, and we can send you some honors gear.
Yes.
That would be good, Patrick.
Yes, I
that
thought you
would
might
be good.
like that. Okay.
Consider it done.
Okay.
I get stuff from Louisville all the time.
I had a feeling you might. I had a feeling you might.
So what about your wife? They didn't get her anything. I'm gonna email you. I want everybody's sizes and your son and Noah. How about that?
Okay.
So NBA, no, I'm just kidding.
The catch is that you'll have to, if you want the merchandise, you have to take a photo with a Kentucky shirt on.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. It's been great.
Thank you all very much.
Appreciate it.